When we look back through NBA history, the majority of championship teams were filled with elite talent. You can go back to teams like the 83 76ers, the 86 Celtics, and the 87 Lakers, who were filled with not only Hall of Fame talent in their prime, but also great role players to complement them. As of recent, teams like the 13 Heat, the 2015 Cavs, and the 2017 Warriors all share similar qualities. However, there have been instances where teams have not had these qualities and despite that, still made it to the finals and won. The first team that comes to mind is the 2003 San Antonio Spurs. Now at first glance, you might say that this was a very talented team. This is a team that featured Tim Duncan alongside two Hall of Famers in David Robinson and Manu Ginobili, with a potential Hall of Famer in Tony Parker. These four were all surrounded by some big name role players like Stephen Jackson, Steve Kerr, Malik Rose, Bruce Bowen, Speedy Claxton, and Kevin Willis. This core was also coached by Greg Popovich, who is known as one of the best coaches in NBA history. But what if I told you that this team, while still great, really wasn't supposed to win it all this year? Yo, what's going on guys? My name is Alex, and let's discuss the 2003 San Antonio Spurs and why Tim Duncan had one of the biggest carry jobs to a finals championship in NBA history. Going into the 2002-2003 season, the Spurs had just lost to the LA Lakers in the second round in 5 games, and the Lakers ended up winning the championship that year for their third year in a row. In this series, the Spurs were just outmatched. Tim Duncan had an all-time series averaging 29 points, 17 rebounds, 4 assists, a steal, and 3 blocks a game. However, Tony Parker, who was a rookie at the time, was the next leading scorer with only 13 a game. Parker was the only other Spur to score in double figures this series. Even a 36-year-old David Robinson couldn't even come close to averaging 10 points a game, and others like Steve Smith and Malik Rose also struggled in that series. Despite this pathetic performance by the supporting crew, the Spurs were still projected to have the 4th best odds to win the championship for the 2002-2003 season. However, the team didn't change all that much. The Spurs did lose out on Antonio Daniels, who had been a solid role player for them for the past couple of seasons, even helping them win the championship back in 1999, but the Spurs were still able to get Speedy Claxton and Steve Kerr alongside their recent draft pick, Manu Ginobili. These additions were good enough for the Spurs to win and exceed their preseason expectations, winning an extra 5 games than expected. Tim Duncan won his second MVP in a row, Tony Parker took a second-year leap, Stephen Jackson played great with an increased role on the offense, Malik Rose and Bruce Bowen stayed solid, and Manu Ginobili as a rookie proved himself to be an important piece off the bench despite much uncertainty there was with drafting him. However, some things were prevalent. If it wasn't obvious enough, at this point of his career, David Robinson was just cooked. He was way out of his prime, only averaging about 8 points, 8 rebounds a game. In addition, some of the vets on this team were also just out of their prime and not even close to what they could do because of their age. You had players like Kevin Willis, who was 40 years old, Steve Kerr was also 37, and they had Steve Smith, who was only 33 years old, but even at that point, he just wasn't even close to what he was doing, even just last season. Most of these guys really only got minutes so that the starters could start, especially Kevin Willis, who subbed in for Tim Duncan, and Tim Duncan played 40 minutes a game that season and still only missed 1 game. Going into the playoffs though, this is where the magical run starts. See, despite winning 60 games and being projected to be one of the best teams in the league, the West was still ran through the Lakers, who were going for their 4th ring in a row with Shaq and Kobe, and the Mavericks, who also won 60 games that season with Dirk and Nash, who also had the best offense in the league. In the first round though, the Spurs faced a young Suns team who won 44 games with Stephon Marbury, a rookie Amari Stoudemire, Sean Marion, Joe Johnson, and Penny Hardaway. The Spurs were able to beat them in 6, however this series showed some problems. Tim Duncan had a great series averaging 18 points, 16 rebounds, 5 assists, and 3 blocks a game. However, the rest of the team really struggled to score. Sure, you can look at the counting numbers and point out that 3 other guys outside of Duncan scored more than 13 points a game, but the efficiency and accuracy was a major problem. As a team in the regular season, the Spurs had shooting splits of 46, 35, and 72. In the Sun series, the Spurs splits plummeted to splits of 40, 30, and 69. This would be a recurring theme. Tim Duncan was the only Spur to keep up his production from the regular season in that series against the Suns, and his performance alone on both sides of the floor, especially defense, is what helped them win that series. The Spurs held the Suns to about 85 points a game in that series, which was 10 points less than what they averaged in the regular season. In the next series, the Spurs faced the defending champion Lakers, a team that looked roughly the same from last season and beat the Spurs last year in 5 games. However, the Spurs beat the Lakers in 6 this time, and this time the supporting crew actually came to play. Bruce Bowen, Manu Ginobili, and Speedy Claxton all had great series and helped Tim Duncan and the Spurs move to the conference finals. However, it is important to note that Tony Parker and Stephen Jackson, who in my opinion are arguably the second or third best player on the team, both had poor shooting performances, with Tony Parker being the biggest culprit as he had 2 bad series in a row now, shooting 40% from the field in both series, 11% from 3 in the Suns series, and only 33% from 3 against the Lakers. Despite their shooting performance, Tim Duncan's defense anchored down the Shaq and Kobe Lakers to 93 points a game as a team in the series, 7 points less than in the regular season. Moving on to the conference finals, the Spurs played the Mavs, who had the best offense in the regular season, scoring 103 points per game, led by Dirk Nowitzki, Steve Nash, Michael Finley, and Nick Van Exel. If you've seen the trend so far in this postseason, you should know that the Spurs defense, led by Tim Duncan, was just too much for the potent Mavs offense, who could only score 96 points per game, 7 points less than the regular season. And while some Spurs role players like Stephen Jackson did shoot well this series, most of the crew shot terribly again. Tony Parker again had a bad series. Manu Ginobili, after having a solid series against the Lakers, went back to shooting 42% from the field, and Malik Rose and Speedy Claxton didn't bring much offensively either. But despite this, the Spurs still won in 6 and made it to the finals, where they played the Jason Kidd Nets. This is where things get the hardest. Despite the Nets being a 49-win team, they were the second best defense in the league. This made scoring even harder than it's been all postseason for the Spurs. However, of everyone getting big minutes, only David Robinson shot over his regular season field goal percentage. Everyone else fell dramatically, and even Tim Duncan's field goal percentage went down by 2%. However, Tim Duncan had one of the best final performances of all time. In this series, Duncan averaged 24 points, 17 rebounds, 5 assists, a steal, and 5 blocks a game, and in the closeout game 6, Tim Duncan had 21 points, 20 rebounds, 10 assists, and 8 blocks to win the NBA Finals. Despite the 2003 Spurs having some big names, I believe there's a huge misconception on what those guys were actually able to do. Tony Parker was just in his second season, Manu Ginobili was a rookie, and David Robinson was in his last year of his career. It would be unfair for me to actually expect these 3 guys to perform how they either did, later in their career or earlier in their career. But the reason why I bring up how poorly they played in this entire finals run is to bring context to the whole situation with them not having that much experience and them just not standing the test of time. And this is important because a lot of people believe that Tim Duncan had all this great help through all of his finals runs, and at least in this particular run on its own, he just didn't. He didn't have that help. The reason why the Spurs were expected to be a great team was solely based on Duncan's greatness and the defense that he anchored. And even though they were projected to be a top 5 team in the league, teams like the Lakers and Mavs were still expected to be better than the Spurs because of the depth and experience those teams had. Tim Duncan had one of the hardest roads to the finals, having to play some all-time great players like Shaq and Kobe, and even Dirk Nowitzki. But people still bring up the fact that the Spurs did play an inferior team in the New Jersey Nets during the finals. This lack of context of the run Duncan had to make it to even win in the first place is a big reason why I think he's actually one of the most underrated players in NBA history. I've seen some people rank him either 9, 10, and even outside of the top 10, which in the grand scheme of things is still a great player. However, Tim Duncan was able to overcome these teams even with the inconsistent help of the supporting cast through his excellence on both sides of the floor, and because of this, Tim Duncan was able to complete one of the biggest carry jobs in NBA history, which to me should solidify him as an all-time player closer to the top 5 than what people actually think. Well, that's a recap of one of the biggest carry jobs in NBA history. Let me know down in the comments below what you think, and let me know if there's anyone else I should cover that you think maybe had a better finals run. If you enjoyed, make sure you guys like and sub. I'd really appreciate it. Make sure to check my socials down below in the description. You can also check out this video somewhere on the screen where I discuss why the 6 Man of the Year award is just dumb. Anyways, I'll see you on the next one. Peace out.